No, thank you so much. Welcome everyone to our very first panel of the 2023 Graphics Canada Expo. We're really, really glad to have you here because we've brought together an expert panel. We've actually brought together small, medium, and large companies to battle it out. Who's better, do we think? Large companies or small companies? Who are you putting your money on? No, I'm joking. That's not what we talk about, right?
Yeah.
No, not at all. We're here to talk about business growth. And so we wanted to talk about what it looks like from the large company perspective and also the small company perspective and how we approach growth. So for those in the audience, how many of you come from a large company? Maybe. Have you had some experience with a large company? Well, for those who do come from a large company, your experience was probably very siloed. You had a very specific goal in your company, and change was very slow. The thing is, with a big company, you do have access to many resources, but putting them into use and getting approval for changes can be a slow and difficult process. However, on the small company side, how many of you come from a small company? Got lots of small companies in the room. Welcome, welcome. From a small company perspective, sometimes things can be chaotic. There's a lot of overlap with roles, which is a great thing. And change happens very dynamically on the fly, very quickly. However, maybe it could be better documented and formalized. So we're here to learn from one another, not fight one another, but just to understand why big companies could think small and small companies could think big. So in a moment, I'm going to introduce our expert panel. I do want to give a quick shout out to our friend Henry Laszutko from CCL Label, who could not be here this morning. We wish him well because he is ill. However, we do have Sean Davis, the Director of Technology at Significans, Deanne Sinclair, owner, Cambridge Label, Dan Thompson, President, Italic Inc., and Charlie MacLean, President, ASL Print Effects. Let's just give them a warm welcome. So I'm just going to turn it over to you guys so you can share a little bit about your experience with a big or small company and where your career has taken you. So Sean, would you like to start us off?
Thank you. I was going to say you took a lot of my talking points away from me. So yeah, my name's Sean Davis, Director of Technology at Significans Automation. From my experience working within the industry, I first started with TC Transcontinental. And so I've worked for a large company for a couple of years and then porting over to Significance Automation, a relatively small company. But with what we do on a daily basis, working with clients, we work with a wide variety of large, medium-sized, small companies. So we're all over the place. I mean, we've done work with, Italic. So we're around the industry. We're constantly working with multi-size companies. And I'm excited to be here today to talk about a little bit about automation and how it affects big companies, small companies, and medium-sized companies.
Welcome. We're happy to have you.
Thank you.
Deanne, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Deanne. I'm the owner and president of my family business, which is Cambridge Label. We are a trade label printer, so we print purely for the print trade and, brokers, printers, advertising agencies across Canada and a bit into the US as well. I have been with my family business now going on 14 years. And so I'm representative of one of the small guys on today's panel, I believe. And it's been great. I get to work alongside my father and we have a really great relationship. So I really enjoyed my time and I'm looking forward to learning from my other panelists today.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Nice.
Dan, welcome.
Thank you for having me. My name's Dan Thompson. I am the founder of Italic, and we are a digital printing company, mainly commercial, in Toronto, and we've just opened up a location in St. John, New Brunswick, on the east coast of Canada. Thanks. Yeah, that was through the pandemic. We are a company of about 20 people, so we're also a small entity, but we really specialize in making high-value communication pieces, things that are impactful, and we really try and make things that keep something different that you hold on to. So we're not into high volume, we're into small, beautiful volume.
Hi, Diondra. I'm Charlie MacLean, President, ASL Print FX. ASL is a Canadian company. We've been around since 1965. We're a flexographic printer. We've got 3 locations. Our main facility, our headquarters, is just down the street in Vaughan. And then we've got 2 other locations, one in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and then one in Napa, California, right in the heart of wine country. So we love visiting that location. And then we employ about 90 people across the company. So I'll take sort of a small, mid-size business approach in this discussion. And we serve a number of customers in markets such as health and beauty, food and beverage, and wine and spirits.
Sounds
So
great.
excited to be part of the panel and looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Diondra Filicetti. I'm your host today. I'm a workshop facilitator and speaker. However, prior to that, I did work for CCL Label alongside Henry. So I will do my best as well to interject from the large company side. And I work specifically in the pharma sector. So let's jump right into some questions. And perhaps this could be part of your opinion, but I would love to know some of the obstacles that we think that large companies face when it comes to growth.
Yeah, I guess I'll go first. From my experience, I would largely say bureaucracy plays a huge factor in a large company. That can get political depending on where we take that conversation, but with a lot of the projects that we work on, it ends up being a problem of we can't make this call. We need to get, the manager involved, and that manager has to go to their manager, and then it goes up the chain. And then the guy at the top has no clue what you're talking about before it trickles back down. So that's a big problem and a big challenge we have in our day-to-day working with clients. But with that, there's definitely little sparks of light here and there where we do have what I like to classify as champions that sort of spearhead that, but that is definitely an issue we deal with.
I mean, we work with large companies, and from my perspective, I see sometimes that they're focused on, quarterly results for shareholders. So there's not really a long-term thinking per se. Sometimes we see a train wreck happen and a revenue stream sort of just all of a sudden disappears, and then the smaller companies usually take the brunt of that decision-making process. I also feel that, it's very budgeted driven. So if we're talking about automation, those decisions don't even happen for a year because either they've run out of budget and we're like, well, let's connect us, like literally connect us. And there's no one on their end to do it. We're willing as the entrepreneurial side, as a smaller company to do that, but sometimes it just doesn't translate. Figure out.
I think I'd take the maybe customer acquisition sort of perspective on it in terms of a smaller business. There can be challenges getting your name out there, new customers being aware of your company, of your brand. So as you try to grow, that's obviously a challenge. At the same time, we're in a growing industry. I think the global label market is forecasted to grow at 4 or 5% year over year through the end of the decade. So we're in a healthy industry, and even if you're a mid-sized small player who has good penetration in certain areas, I have to imagine that there's a whole host of other opportunities in different markets, different verticals where you can look for growth opportunities. So I think your smaller size is a challenge in terms of awareness, but it can also be an advantage in terms of finding new areas for growth.
Absolutely.
Did you have anything to add? No, I think they've covered it off. I typically my customer base is more small to medium-sized businesses, given that I'm dealing with the print trade. So my exposure really in dealing with large corporations is actually more on the supplier side to me. And I have seen that sometimes, like I always take the approach of, customer comes first, regardless of, so if it's going to cost an extra whatever, like we have to take care of the customer. Whereas I find sometimes with large corporations, it's just like, well, like you mentioned, like our quarter is this, and this is actually what would be best for us as a corporation to meet our quarterly deadline. And it's like, well, that doesn't work for me. And it's like, well, can you still try and accommodate this for the quarter? And I'm like, that doesn't work for me. So I have more exposure dealing with like large corporations on the supplier side. And sometimes that's a little frustrating because I'm like, why can't they just have my mentality of like, let's just give her what she wants, right?
Yeah, there's definitely like a speed differential there that can be frustrating.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think the other factor there too is they tend to focus on market share and oversaturation of a singular market that they always focus on, and that extremely stifles growth. I don't know if any of you have experienced that, working with suppliers that are larger customers, but what do? You don't really innovate anymore. Let's just buy a company to then expand that market share, but they're not trying to innovate or change their brand or do anything like that. They're just focusing on one streamlined process.
I can agree with that. Like in my experience with CCL, we were very separated. And like I said, our roles were very, very specific. And so for that reason, because you're disconnected with some of the other processes, it's very difficult to innovate because you have to bring together loads of people to come up with the ideas and see how those decisions affect all these different departments. So that definitely is a slow process. However, we do have representatives here who have contributed to a lot of business growth. You've heard them talk a little bit about it. So let's talk about, the benefits of the small company approach and what you guys have experienced in that sense.
I'll let you start first. Now we'll go around.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of alluded to it earlier, but I think decision making is very, more of a simplistic process in a small or medium sized operation. It's very easy to enact change and typically involves, just like either, I make the decision or I involve a handful of people, small handful of people, and like we can act quick, right? Whereas, with corporations having to deal with budgets and, maybe a board of directors and multiple, considering shareholder value and all of those other external factors, they probably can't be like, oh, I'm going to, invest in this and go down, differentiate my business by, integrating a new method of printing or a new product like shrink sleeve or shrink sleeve printer. And, that would probably take a long time to enact change. Yeah.
I mean, decision making for sure happens very quickly. And in a small company, you have to be efficient because there's no room for fat. And so with that comes an entrepreneurial mindset where everyone's willing to do more or to get to the goal. And so if you have really well-defined goals, I find that you can all rally around, get it done. And that might show up as like, we have a job in the shop that needs to get out. Everyone on board. So we're all there doing it. That doesn't happen necessarily in a large company. But those types of like seminal moments when people jump in and help the business grow implicitly. And it's fabulous when you have a team of people that you can rely to be there and understand that their effort matters. I feel in a small company, morale is usually higher. Sometimes there's a lot of complaining, but most of the time, everyone's like really just, honestly capable and happy to be there. So.
I think we've all sort of touched on it. It's, a large organization is going to have a lot of resources to dedicate to a problem, and that's what you need in certain instances. But a smaller company is going to be able to, respond quickly to challenges, to opportunities. And, you got to leverage that to build your relationships with your customers because you're not going to have the same access to resources that others do. But I think, there's room for that strategy to work, and it can certainly help to build very strong partnerships.
And I just say, like, we go through the RFP process a lot, and I'm always fascinated to understand why people choose Italic after a long RFP process. And it comes down, large corporations sometimes choose small corporations because they get a better feeling from them. They know who the characters are that are involved. And it's really hard to do that in a large organization. We hear people talk about culture in a larger organization. And there are large corporations with a very strong cultural basis, but I feel like a small company can really portray that crystal clear. And business people want to still deal with business, which is great for a small company.
Absolutely.
Well, it's very much customer focused, right? In a small company. And I do find personally, there's a pro and con to it, but you tend to have in a small company one person that knows everything in every part of it because you're wearing multiple hats,
Yeah.
right? Where in a big company, and you had mentioned that you're sort of a cog in a machine, you have that one-to-one relationship with somebody. Oh yeah, I know exactly what to do, or I can go back and help out with somebody. So you have that relationship, and it makes it much easier to work with that group or that person. So yeah.
Thank you. And Charlie, I'm so glad that you mentioned some of those benefits of working for a large company, because you do have access to resources. There is access to experts, and when you need to solve a problem, like you can really locate who that person is to come help you. So since we talked about some of the challenges from a large company perspective, let's talk about some of your challenges to growth from a small company perspective. So what obstacles have you faced, and how have you overcome those?
I think it'd be pretty much what I said, the pros and cons of one person knows everything, because they're relied upon for everything. And even for the company I work for, you have to wear multiple hats because you are a small company, and there are challenges sometimes where vacation plays into a factor, and it's a struggle to have bandwidth to then support your team, but also be supported. And I think that's the biggest challenge for growth from our perspective as a company, but also working with our small clients as well.
Yeah, I mean, growth for us has never been like a nice linear path. You basically work yourself into insanity and then jump up to the next plateau, right? So really being mindful of human resources, not burning everybody out. That can really happen in a small company very easily. Access to financial resources can always be a struggle. Financing, big equipment purchases, having to really justify the purchase for financial reasons that you may or may not qualify for at that level of your business has been a challenge at times. And I think we're going to see more of that for small businesses. Interest rates increase. Equipment's getting more expensive because of the financing. And it's going to shut out a lot of growth opportunities for small businesses, I feel.
Yeah, Dan, you kind of talked about, how large companies sometimes choose smaller companies to be their supplier. And I think the reason for that a lot of times is you're not going to be able to compete on price or on resources, or at least not for very long. So like you were saying, is get integrated at as many levels of the organization with your customer as you can. So you can build that relationship, build that partnership. Within our company, it's not just the salesperson who owns the relationship with the customer. It's the CSR, it's pre-press, it's production, and it's kind of that that whole approach at all levels that allows us to build trust and build reputation, and then hopefully give that customer the good feeling that you're talking about, so that they choose you over a supplier who can provide more resources, can throw more experts at a problem, but they recognize that when things hit the fan, maybe the smaller guy will be there a little bit quicker and a little bit more involved.
Yeah. So one thing that I feel like I have been battling with, and I did a lot of research. When I did my MBA, I was mentioning to you, I spent a lot of time, almost a year, studying, small businesses versus large businesses, and what is stopping the smalls becoming the largest. And the biggest thing, and it happens so commonly, is that person at the top that knows everything, that is really the driving force behind the business and the strategy, and is able to drive change and growth. You don't have enough financial resources to hire, a head of HR, to hire a head of IT, to hire, a head of all these other departments. So that person ends up doing everything. So then instead of focusing on innovation and change, they get roped into, all different areas. Like myself, I didn't have somebody helping me with HR until like this year. And I was HR, and I would come in and I would have all these things I want to do. And then somebody go, I need to talk to you about this. I need to talk to you about this. And then I look at the clock and I'd be like, it's 2 p.m. And I feel like I have always had like a running to-do list. And I'm like, I feel like I have not accomplished any of these things that actually would be most beneficial for the company. So it's kind of hard to take that leap forward of hiring someone, getting another person on your payroll as a small business, and then also just delegating. I've had a hard time. It's a family business, I'm sure you can relate, but it's these people well, you've known them for over 10 years. They want to talk to you and you have to say sorry, I need to focus on this instead of that is a hard thing, I think. And it's something I still battle with, and something I don't even know if I really want to do that. Like I have a hard time doing that. So
HR is a crazy portfolio. It's difficult, and I'm not an HR specialist. I know that's not my strength, but yes, it takes up a lot of time. And yet, being stretched all the time as the owner, my goal for this year, that I feel is impeding our growth, is to, we sell. Both Sean and I, the partners of Italic, we sell, and it's time that we start to develop Salesforce. It's the only path forward that we can see to grow because we have a finite amount of time. And that time's valuable, and we need to be focusing on that, the bigger vision, where we're headed, strategic, environmental, more automation, and all these things that, sit over here. Meanwhile, revenue, without that, we can't do this. So it's a
delicate balance. It's a delicate balance because there's the theory of if you build it, they will come. Well, you don't have the money to build it until they arrive.
Hey.
So how do you proceed with adding headcount, adding equipment, building your capacity so you can take in new customers? So it's a thin line, and yeah, we go through a lot of the same challenges, Deanne. Yeah.
And I would just throw it out there. Any small business watching this is like, get a good team of consultants as a small business owner around you to advise and point out those things where maybe implicitly, but you're not doing because you just get so busy doing everything else.
I mean, Dan, I'm right here. You can call me.
Thanks.
I think it even comes back to, if you've heard of the time management quadrant, where it's split up into 4 quadrants, and it's about what's important versus not important versus urgent and not urgent. And so trying to spend your time in what's important. Maybe not necessarily urgent, but something that will forward your long-term goals. And that's difficult, like you said, on a daily basis, you're facing urgent problems that are not necessarily important, but it's something that you've got to deal with as a small company because you don't have the manpower necessarily. So I wanted to step away for a second from the resources, whether that's human resources or financial, and talk a little bit about the intangibles that you guys mentioned. And I want to talk about the mentality that you see in small companies versus large companies. And is there a certain mentality that you try to instill in your customers and within your team?
Interesting. I think the biggest one when it comes to skill sets of the employees, the bigger the company, it becomes a conversation of, that's not my job, it's somebody else's job. It sort of goes back to, again, in a small company, there's one person who knows everything, or you do wear multiple hats. So that definitely plays a huge factor there. I think with a lot of the projects that I work on, it's trying to convince them that sort of to the whole scope of this panel is thinking small, right? Get out of that mentality of being big business, get back to your roots, focus on that first and foremost.
yeah. I touched on it earlier, but customer always comes first. Always, always, always. And again, I think that gets lost in large corporations. I'll share a personal experience dealing with the business, but I was installing a new piece of equipment and I wasn't ready for it yet because I needed to take over actually at least some more space. And I didn't have that space yet. And they were like, well, we need to get it in there. You need to get it in there. And I was like, no, that doesn't mean I physically cannot put it anywhere. They were like, why don't we just deliver it? It can sit out in the back of your warehouse and we can bring in a generator. And I'm like, that doesn't work. I don't want to set it up twice. Just wait a month, right? And I felt like they weren't hearing my voice. And I never want my team to get away from the fact that, we listen to the customer and the customer comes first. Yeah.
I think for us, it's similar. It's kind of elevating our customer in our mindset by actually kind of referring to our employees as number one. And so we kind of take the mindset that customer satisfaction is king. But if we take great care of our employees, they're going to do a great job servicing our customers. They'll be passionate about the company. They'll be engaged. So that's the mindset we need to take, and it kind of goes back to the point I was making about integrating with the customer and building those relationships. And so we really try to drive that through the organization, and that's how we're gonna distinguish ourselves, as sort of a mid-sized player competing against larger competitors.
Yeah, I mean, We just sort of think in the way that our customer, we really try as a small business to tailor our communication style directly as the customer would like to be communicated to as. And so with that mentality, I think in a smaller business, it's really important to morph how you're being communicated to. It really does help getting all your employees like trained on the actual customer is and really getting everybody speaking with the same type of voice to make sure that the interactions happen as they should.
Absolutely. I wanted to point out one benefit just from my experience at CCL. Something that I remember that we did well in terms of connecting with the customer was actually we tried to position ourselves as the expert for our customer. And one thing that we did well is when we did run into issues or any problems that customers experienced, it was all documented. So we did have a library of things that we could go back into to see what the problem was, how did we solve it, what resources were involved. So in case we came up with that again, someone, these documents were available to anyone in the company. So you could take a look through them if you really wanted to, if you don't know who that was. So just wanted to put that out there as well. And then my next question is around measuring success. I know that can be a very difficult thing as we take our breaths in, but how do you measure success? Are there specific metrics that you use, or what is your approach?
I'll let you guys go first since it's different for me working with clients. So.
I mean, I feel like I don't have any like secret sauce on this one. It's kind of like the standard, Yeah, looking at, your basic metrics of like year-over-year sales, profitability. But one thing that I do measure and track, all the time is our on-time delivery, because I feel like in print it's especially important to always have on-time delivery. Customers, of course, they always want it yesterday. So, our goal is 95% plus on-time delivery, and I look at that on a monthly basis. And then every month that we achieve that, I do a catered meal for everybody in the company. And so I'm proud to report that April we were 98.5% on time. And I have seen that it'll be interesting to see how we maintain that going into the summer, because as a small company, you're always dealing with, everybody wants to take their summer vacation time, but I'm like determined to get that. So I look at that, and then of course I look at like the standard, financial metrics.
I mean, financials, it's always there. I would say as a small business owner, one I track the most is probably cash flow, making sure that we're able and ready. And without that flow, it's your lifeline. It's a small business. There's some fewer reserves, fewer things that you can tap into. So cash really does mean everything as a financial metric. Now, in the company itself, there's lots of ways we can calculate success, employee happiness, number of employees. I never knew that as a small, like when we started out, we had 3. And then everyone kept asking me, well, how many employees do you have? How many employees? And I didn't know exactly what they were asking. They were like, what size are you and where are you going? And if you really can start to think about like, well, how many employees are we and where do we need to be? And what are the roles as a small business? Like, we learned that, and having an employee and bringing on someone new isn't like, it's not like, these large corporations like Microsoft, you hear like hiring thousands and then laying off thousands. It's like, you have a person and you have to train them and invest so much in them, and they're not even functional until, a year out. And it's really, as a small business to do that. I measure a lot. We have very good relationships with our employees. We have many employees that are celebrating over 8 to 10 years with us as a small company. I think that's fantastic, and we love them. And I know the company just wouldn't be the same without them. So I would put a very big measure of success on the people.
Same as you guys, the metrics can vary depending on sort of the initiative or the functional area that you're talking about. Sales is revenue margin. In production, we look to measure efficiencies in terms of waste, setup time, run time. Our quality numbers are something that we keep a very close eye on, obviously. See, I think there's a number of different metrics that could drive your business, and then there's also sort of the qualitative and the quantitative approach to culture, and like what's our employee retention rate, what's our customer retention rate, and all those things. So there's a wide breadth of metrics and ways to measure it, and we try to use as many of them as we can, in sort of a positive way.
Yeah, I think they hit it on the head with the small side. From my experience from the large side of things, working at Transcontinental, we would do town halls every quarter. And how they typically focus was market share. How much have we dominated the market the past couple quarters? And then it was almost the complete opposite of whatever you guys talked about. It wasn't really worried about how many new customers. It was strictly the market share, and it was a dollar amount, but it was a total overall dollar amount. But the other major factor was, as a big company, Transcontinental focused on brands. So, how many brands did we pull in? How many brands did we retain from our year-to-year contracts that we have with them? So that was a huge thing that they always focused on, and it was really, for better or worse, less about the employee. It was more about business, big business, and how can we maintain that moving forward. And I'm sure you felt the same with CCL.
Absolutely. Same thing at the town hall.
Yeah.
Yeah. My next question is around technology. So I'm sure you'll have a lot to add about this, but I want to know what the role of technology plays in your growth strategy.
I actually have no experience. Yeah, I mean, it's the bread and butter of what Significant does. We go into clients as sort of like a consultancy service company. Dan knows very well, obviously. What I tend to tell the clients, there is when we talk about innovation and we talk about automation, you always have to talk about standardization of your processes as well. And what a lot of customers fail to see, especially on the small side, you guys have hit it on the head multiple times, we're customer focused. So, customer's always right. That's what we want to do. But when it comes to automation, you need to take a step back from that and realize you can't allow the customer to send you a PowerPoint 2 minutes before the job needs to be printed, right? Like, it needs to be a PDF document. Well, I see you're disagreeing there, but when we're talking about you want to automate, right? Sure. You want to be, a lot of small companies want to do the hands-off approach. You can't be hands-off if you don't have a set of business rules or something standardized. Because really, you're telling a Mac or a PC to do something, and that computer needs a set of defined rules. Big companies are a little more forgiving, but again, they're just focused on input-output. They already have a standardized process, and I think that's the one thing that I find small companies need to focus on a bit more when it comes to innovating is think more about standardization, and then automation comes through that.
I mean, yes. I think as a small company, there are two roles to play. If we're talking about selling to the industry and keeping customers happy, and the customer's always right, you're going to get a PowerPoint presentation, and you need to know how to deal with it. That said, you also need to be able to develop better practices for that customer too, and really educate to get them into those streams. We have two real silos to our business. One is data-driven automated processes, which are growing, and it's sort of turning us into more of a technology company than a printing company. And then we have the let's make a project that's no one's done before kind of project, and that is not automated and never will be, and we like that too. So I think every small printing company in the commercial space right now definitely has to be looking at automating to grow, I think. But I also fear that with process and data-driven apps, then it will change you into you won't be looking for that really value-add sell all the time. You'll be looking at processes and spreadsheets, and it's a different beast. So in my humble opinion, it's best to be both and really try and service two different types of work until AI basically enables us to do automation and provide value at the same time.
I was very tempted to get those boxing gloves in.
Let's go.
For us, technology's played a huge part. We'll continue to do so in a number of areas. I mean, sales and that obviously, production. We're a flexographic printer. Seeing where the industry is going, we've recently invested in inkjet technology. So that's that's technology that's helped us gain efficiencies, allows us to go after different customers. And then we're also looking, on the front end of things. We're always looking at software and automation. What can help our speed, our responsiveness, accuracy with customers when it comes to pre-press and estimating, and really at the beginning of sort of the funnel for our work order process. So I think it's going to play a huge role. I'm sure a lot of converters are keeping their eye on what can provide returns for them and make them a more efficient, more profitable printer.
Great answer.
Yeah, similarly, I'm looking at technology from two perspectives. One, how can we be more efficient internally? But then two, what could I be investing in that would, improve our product offerings to our customer base, enabling us to be a better supplier. And, always lots that I want to buy. I always joke, I call it my Christmas wish list. So as being a small business owner, I'm always like, my father and I, we run the company together. His name's Terry. So I'll say, Terry, I want this for Christmas. I always have a long list of endless things that I want. So
It'll be cheaper to buy a car, I think. Always.
absolutely.
I think no matter what, at the end of the day, it's a little bit of like what I tell my clients, the walk before you run methodology. So it's take it, short and sweet, and then grow and advance from there. So.
No, really great perspectives. And I really like the idea of having that stream for the automated processes and bringing a lot of your business through that so it runs efficiently, but then also, having the ability to respond to those new projects, those very different projects where you have to innovate on your feet. I think that is something that both small and large companies should be able to do, no matter the size, so that you're constantly learning how to bring a new business and maybe learning how to shift it over to that automated side. So next, I'm just going to go through a couple of scenarios, and I want to know how you would approach these scenarios. These would be common scenarios for small or big companies. And then after that, I want to turn it over to you guys. If you have specific questions or specific challenges in your businesses, feel free to ask. We've got a panel of experts who have come from very different backgrounds, and we'll see what advice or tips they can give you. So the first scenario, an old and established large company. The MIS system is outdated and there are different systems for graphics and all different business functions. Because of this, there are layers of redundancy, lead times are long, and it takes the company a long time to process new products. From your experience, what are the obstacles to growth in this situation, and how would you approach improving the situation?
So changing of any software and systems takes months, if not years. I'm sure you guys feel that. And I mentioned it's largely a walk before you run process. So really what I tend to focus on is what are the short wins we can do to whether or not it's going to give you immediate growth. Let's try and standardize, streamline processes, maybe take away some of those very simple tasks or simple work that you get in. It's sort of a 80-20, 70-30 rule, right? Let's knock out those standardized things, and then let's save your team time to focus on the customized processes. Because again, the customer's always right. You want to help those. You want to retain customers, get new customers. And at the same time, then you have the flexibility and the bandwidth to look for a new MIS system or look for something else that's going to fit in to your overall culture.
Awesome.
Sean told you, how to fix it, and I think he's the expert to do that. I mean, I would just say why you need to fix it is if your customers are feeling frustration at the very beginning of the process, you're going to lose them very quickly, and you're going to find it hard to bring in new customers. So it's just going to cause, your sales funnel to dwindle, and, you're going to be in a very, very difficult situation. So that's something where you want to open up the beginning of the funnel, and how you do it, you rely on the experts to tell you and how you get there. But it's certainly a problem that needs to be addressed.
Absolutely. So I'll turn it over to the small company scenario. So a new small company has just purchased some digital equipment. Their systems are very manual, there's no real workflow, and files are simply processed in Creative Suite before being sent to press. The team is dynamic with fast turnaround time and the ability to churn out new projects very quickly. However, there's a lack of repeatability. From your experience, what obstacles to company growth do you see, and how would you approach improving this situation?
I'll start this one off because this actually kind of happened at my family business. As we started down the digital path, of course, we're starting a new business unit. You have manageable, a manageable workload. But as we started seeing more and more files coming in, it was like, okay, the way that we're just doing this is honestly not sustainable unless I add so many more people. So we invested in, software and systems. Our MIS system integrates with our pre-press system. So that files can be set up more automatically. So what we used to take hours to do could honestly be done in an 8-hour shift was now condensed into a 1 to 2 hour time frame. So that saved us a lot of time, enabled us to be more responsive. But I would say one thing that really helped me implement that change was I had my pre-press manager was she, I think, was just pulling her hair out. She was desperate, right? It's really getting everybody in the team on board. It's, I think, the greatest challenge in getting buy-in. But thankfully we were at a point where I had the buy-in, right? I didn't have to, struggle with that. They were let's embrace this. And they thankfully handled all the implementation for me because I'm not a pre-press person. So yeah, it worked out quite well. But I think there's that tipping point of you have to.
Yeah. I mean, you were describing my company when we started out, basically, and we quickly came to know that it was not sustainable or healthy to continue operating that way. So we started making investments early on, and we would always reach a little bit more than we thought we should be, with the idea that we saw at the time this technology coming down into our small company sphere that was only really reserved for the large corporations, with mainframes, and I'm talking a long time ago because I'm that old. And then as technology came down into our sphere, we would grab as high as we could to put those pieces into play. And there's a lot of pieces small business need to have in play to actually create a network, but you do it one bite at a time, and you keep adding to what's next, what's here, what's there. And honestly, we have jobs now that are simply code that come in. There's no real file. It assembles itself and it goes out and gets printed, and it's code-based PDF basically that's being ripped, and a docket gets made, and we processed 30,000 jobs last month with no touches, and that job is like a postcard being mailed to you or you. And so they're small little micro jobs, but those jobs are invisible now in the marketplace. You can't do this any other way without automation, without technology. But we are running applications like FileMaker to do the administration of that. We are running things like ESCO Automation Engine, a heavy-duty workflow solution. But I remember our very first script that we wrote as a small company used Mac Automator to trigger an event like that, the little man. It was the only way to make this automation piece start before we invested in the bigger system that then made it industrial bulletproof. But small companies can definitely do this, but you need to do it because there are so many types of work now that you can't do without it.
No, thank you.
It sounds like a common challenge for a lot of smaller companies. They've made the investment in the Ferrari, but they've got a Honda Civic engine.
Yeah, right.
And maybe that's it. Is they spend $1 million on a press and they don't have the money to a few $100,000, whatever it is, to invest in the front end software that's going to make the whole thing work together. So maybe it's a staged approach, but yeah, you're kind of handcuffing yourself if you don't have the full system in place. But it's a common problem. We talked early on about resources. of small versus large organizations. And this is kind of one of those, one of those obstacles you have to get around, and maybe you have to do your investments in stages, and it's not ideal.
I'm gonna go with the boxing gloves here.
Let's go.
Let's drive the Honda Civic across town a couple times, and we don't need a Ferrari all the time.
Well, that's what they're doing right now, right? That's it. It's not as efficient as it could be, and
That's
maybe
right.
down the road, that capital will be there for a future investment.
Yeah. But any small company can invest into these systems and can start. I would say now, with the advent of AI coming into the marketplace as well, that's going to have great applications for our business, whether it be estimating faster, quicker, and giving customer service on a portal, or these type of text-driven applications. But then, if we really expand that out to like visuals and visual creation, and I'm in the business of variable data, there's a whole bunch of things that we can now move to another level with the right thought, with the right coding, with the right, customer, of course, and put that in place and just really try and make new products and bring new value to the market. So it's great.
Yeah, we try to be as agnostic as possible to what you guys are saying. You don't need that Ferrari all the time. There's a lot of software on the road, a lot of software out there that doesn't require you to fork out $100,000 US on top of that. There's FileMaker you can use. I've seen people use Microsoft Access as a database to maintain information. There's smaller companies that do imposition like Quite, right, where it's like maybe $1,000 a year instead of some of these big companies. So you start small, you get into that basic automation, and then you work your way up from there. Everyone has to start somewhere, and you'd be surprised how much you can get bang for your buck out of something like a FileMaker.
Yes, absolutely.
Great answers. Thank you so much. I want to turn it over to you guys now for an opportunity to share some of your specific challenges or any questions that you have for our panelists.
Some reason sell us
Some of the benefits for smaller companies being have mindset
line things in different numbers.
and vice versa.
What was that to you guys first?
The benefits of a small company acting as a big company. I mean, yeah, our reach is global right now. We have customers in Australia, a lot in the United States. We've shipped to China, United States, Australia, UK. It's not small business versus is local. It's small business equals the world now, and with network production with the right platform, you can have output partners in different cities, different continents that can help you grow with large corporations that need distribution globally. So we are doing that. It's amazing. It still amazes me. So as a small company of 20, we integrate with large brands who you all know, and they trust us to do their work because they know we're responsive and thinking like a large corporation. Yeah.
Morning.
Morning.
How much was collaboration within the industries years? Supply and was so important that you think role as a small company here with in sharing, collaborating with large organizations. I think it's very relevant. I don't know how it's not a business of the life service.
So go ahead, yeah.
Well, I was gonna say, I think it's really important, and I always try and, that saying, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. Not necessarily that they're my enemies, but I feel like I, have befriended some fellow label printers that we don't necessarily compete, because me being a trade printer, we don't directly go after the same customer demographic, probably like ourselves. So you might get a phone call in the future.
Yeah, we've had a few.
But sometimes I just call them up, and it's good to have, somebody that's in the same space that you can bounce things off of, that's going through the same challenges, probably, the same issues in terms of trying to, grow sales and attract talent and all that stuff. So it's really nice, I think, to be able to kind of lean on your industry peers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're all sort of, exposed to the same challenges and opportunities. And so I would encourage, especially smaller printers getting into the industry, join a trade association. There's a lot of collaboration, a lot of cooperation that happens within the industry. And you're going to need, sort of your panel of experts to call on, because there's going to be big purchase decisions that you're going to have to make from an equipment standpoint. And to be able to pick up the phone, talk to somebody who's already made one of those decisions and kind of tell you the pitfalls of it. Or, Deanne and I were just talking about shrink sleeves earlier, before the chat started. So I think the more that you can rely on your industry of peers, it's we all compete, but we're all looking to grow this pie together. So I think there's a big advantage in that.
Thank you so much for your time this morning. And really good insight and a lot of things I can take away. So thanks a lot for your insight. Dan, this question's for you. Can you just explain or briefly describe your 14-year process with your family business? And then being a smaller company and a family business, what are some challenges that maybe you deal with in a smaller business that's not family wouldn't deal with?
Yeah, interesting question. Thank you. Yeah, over my 14 years, I started working when I was doing my undergraduate degree. So I started in the summers, and then upon graduation, I came back and I started working full time. And then I left and I went back to school to do my MBA because, to your point about working with the family, one requirement of my father that he had for me was, if you're going to take over the company, I need you to have your master's in business, and I'm not passing the torch to you at all. It's like totally off the table until you do this. So I went back to fulfill that requirement. And then when I came back, then he was like, okay, we can start, kind of start to pass that torch. Now, at that point in time, I had already had about 6-7 years exposure to the team. So it was it's been a very long process, very gradual process. Came at no surprise to anybody. And I felt like when I finally did take over the reins, I had known everybody for like 8 years at that point. And then what really kind of forced him out entirely out of the picture for the most part was actually COVID and the pandemic. You wouldn't think that would be a driving force, but when COVID hit, he's in his 70s. He was like, okay, I'm out. If you need me, call me, but otherwise, I think you've got it. So then ever since then, he hasn't been as involved. And yeah, so I would say that he did it very gradually and kind of gave me bits of responsibility at a time, as opposed to just ducking me in at full tilt. And then in terms of the challenges, I mean, I think that I'm lucky. We work really well together and we have a very professional relationship. I don't call him dad at work. He's Terry. We have that kind of respect for one another, and I still view him as like my boss. Whereas I feel like in other family businesses, that isn't so much the case in certain dynamics. So I kind of almost within the walls of work, like I almost look at it as like he's not my dad in a way. But outside of work, when we go sit at the dinner table, like he's dad. So I feel like that has helped a lot.
Are there any other family members in the business?
So I have an older sister. She's not in the business. She's an accountant, a tax accountant, and she likes that. So that kind of worked out for me. I think that makes it less complicated. My dad's always said the less family, the better. One point in time, my mom wanted to come work. He was like, no, like you can stay home. So it's just the two of us.
I remember a couple years ago, the same thing happened to me. I was in my office and I yelled across the room, "Hey, Grandma, can you come?" And then Richard said, like, that sounds so weird.
Yeah.
I feel thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Last thing I'll say, I got that piece of advice from one of my friends from business school. He went to work for a small private equity company downtown Toronto, and they had multiple family members working in the business. And he said the daughter was always like, "Dad, Dad," whereas the son would be like, "Rob, I need you." And so prior to hearing that from my friend, I was actually calling him dad at work. And then like that day I switched.
Any final questions for our panel?
Yeah.
Is there anything a small business can learn and implement, more importantly, fairly quickly from a bigger company to speed up their growth?
Great question.
I'm gonna feel like a broken record at this point.
Automation.
Well, not just on, but mostly again what I said earlier on about the standardization. That's the biggest thing that big companies do well. to a certain detriment of they don't get certain customers, which you guys fill that market, right? But yeah, there's definitely, you know, being a medium-sized company, I think you sort of fit that
Yeah.
best of both worlds.
Yeah, I think, be ready to be nimble, to, change course if you need to along the journey. It's not going to be a straight line to where you're going, especially if you're starting out in this industry or you're smaller. There's going to be unexpected twists and turns. And so I'd say just be ready. Use the advantage of your size to be quick to respond to those challenges and those opportunities as they come along. Because just to bring full circle, you're not going to have the resources to throw at it. So you're going to have to be very strategic. And I think that's the way you'll succeed and the way you'll grow.
Yep.
Sounds good.
Well, if that's all the questions, I want to thank you all for being here. I apologize about the last minute route change, but to our panelists, thank you so much for sharing your experience and your knowledge. I really appreciate you being here. I will put these away since nobody ended up fighting. And a round of applause. So please feel free to connect with all of them on LinkedIn, or as they're headed out the door, feel free to connect with them and ask them any personal or private questions that you wanted to know that you might not have asked in front of the audience. So thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the show.